How you
Oh,
doing
look.
today?
Gentlemen.
Hello.
Are we allowed to use your names there? Do you use your name?
That's fine. I'll change it to PF Jung now.
Yeah, you can do that.
I'm about to dox you to the world.
Yeah,
You're not
keep that brand consistency.
You're not up yet.
That's fair.
So, but I'll fix it. How's it going, man?
Very cool. It's going swell. I've been watching the show for the past.
Is
30 minutes
PF
or so.
Jung a play on PF Chang?
Are you racist?
That did go into the thought process.
Really?
Yeah, it did. You know how you heard of
Knew
the Jennifer Aniston neuron?
No.
I have not. No.
There's a in the field of neuroscience, to my understanding, is they were able to detect like a specific neuron that would go off when they showed people the face of Jennifer Aniston and Jennifer Aniston's face only. And so I figured, hey, if there's a PF Chang's neuron, then I'll just kind of, parasitize myself onto that and then do a PF Jung combination.
That's not a bad idea. It's worked.
Not true.
It's worked well for me with Lilo and Stitch. Everyone thinks Adam and
Stitch. Yeah. Oh, the rhyming.
Yes.
The grandmother cell, sometimes called the Jennifer Aniston neuron.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So Chang. So Jung.
Calling you Chang feels wrong.
Yes, Jung is in Carl Jung. Right, like
has
Jordan
done
Peterson's.
Right,
Jung.
exactly.
Okay.
Yes.
Obviously, this is how I've discovered your channel. I used to be a huge Jordan Peterson fan.
Yeah, I know. I heard.
So, but how are you? What is your take on the recent change?
Questionable decision making?
Okay, so that's interesting that you're casting it as questionable decision making.
Yeah, well, I don't like, as much as I really value Jordan Peterson's work and whatnot. And I got a lot of value of it, particularly like in college a few years ago, because like the self-help stuff and just the practical psychological advice, it's like that's indisputably useful. Even as critics are like,
of course, yeah, this
is good, right? And their usual criticism is it's just generic self-help advice. Like, what's the big deal? It's like, okay, well, if that's the case, that's fine then. And so I think like the maps and meaning stuff and kind of the theological and scientific work he's doing is deeply, I think has significant implications and will have it over time. But his political stuff is not interesting to me. And I think it's symptomatic of the fact that he is a little bit older. And so he doesn't have the understanding of the nuance that goes along with like social media and how to communicate stuff. So like what's the clip when he says, "Up yours, woke moralist. We'll see who cancels who." It's like the fact that he said that and didn't have the awareness that was going to just be mocked like left, right, and center. It's like that's an indication that he didn't grow up with the internet. He didn't grow up with social media.
Yeah.
Right.
It's worse than that. No one at Daily Wire
they should have warned him.
Got that either. I mean, I can't imagine. I mean, I just imagine the editor on that video just laughing his ass off, going, "Oh my God, this is like the worst mistake he's ever made."
I know. Someone tweeted, "This is like when you're playing Red Alert 2 and the AI general sends you a generic taunt in the middle of the game." Yeah. I'm like, oh my God. Yeah, it's just... That's rough.
Well, and there's a declaration in there that he's going to cancel them, which seemed completely off-brand to me.
We'll see who cancels who.
It's like dude. So now you're for cancel culture?
Yeah, and the other thing, the whole like joining the Daily Wire thing, it's like I get because he just released a video like 45 minutes ago while you guys were streaming. He says it's just a 4-minute clip says why I joined the Daily Wire, and he says like he says. He enjoys working with Ben Shapiro. He's going to put together some more theological work on like Exodus and Genesis. He is worried about censorship, which I think is reasonable. So it's like, okay, if you're going to join an independent network, that's fine. That makes sense. And he said a few other things, but like you said it earlier, it's like he's, what's the rule of banning ideology? And it's like now he's lined up with Matt Walsh, who has in his Twitter bio theocratic fascist. And it's like people will say, well, that's a joke. But it's like, okay, if Vosh put in his Twitter bio, communist revolutionary, It's like, I'm sure Jordan Peterson would be like, well, that's a joke that's revealing his true character. It's like Matt Walsh is clearly, a religious right winger, and so when he calls himself a theocratic fascist, it's like that's just.
Yeah, he means it.
It's like
he totally.
Yeah. He's like, oh, we want to ban porn and
and yoga.
And it's like, and I think he's against gay marriage too, and it's just like,
yeah.
The only counter argument, or I think the advantage you could say, is if Jordan Peterson is bringing a more liberal bent to the Daily Wire, then I think you might have a case if that's actually.
But he's not.
Well, I know. We'll have to see what he whips out. It'll be interesting to him talking to Ben Shapiro, because it's like Jordan Peterson doesn't believe in God. Like he not in the way that Ben Shapiro believes in God. So like, are they ever gonna hash that out, or are they just gonna sweep it under the rug? You know what I mean?
You think Jordan Peterson is the secret atheist?
No, Jordan Peterson does believe in God now. He's gone completely.
I think I've seen stuff where he says, like, if you ask me, yes, I basically believe in God. He says I act as if I believe in God, which is the pragmatist perspective.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I don't know. It's been it's been interesting for me, because like I started my channel, a lot of it was breaking down Jordan Peterson's maps of meaning type work and trying to explain it, simply or whatnot. And then when you get into we question whether adults should be able to transition. It's like, that's not an interesting, nuanced exploration of, religion and science. That's like a pure political stance, which, I mean, I know you guys have different opinions. I mean,
mm-hmm.
Let me
what's
read
your guys' perspective?
Well, let me read Brain's super chat first, because I feel it's pertinent. Brain for $5 says, centrist, in quotes, as if we're not centrist, which I have a problem with to begin with, just because I mean, I'll just address it and go back to the super chat. Like, centrists take sides. Okay, they do take sides, and it's just because we don't feel that Jordan Peterson has come down on the right side of two issues now with us doesn't make us not centrist. Okay.
You guys leftists now?
It means we have a disagreement on a couple of issues, Ukraine and transitioning, with Jordan Peterson. Okay. So we're still centrist. We can disagree on those issues. That's fine. But centrist, quotes, coping and seething, Peter Jordanson is on the right. If any of you were half as centrist as you claim, this would be a non-issue. Cry harder. Well, it seemed to me
that made me sneeze out in laughter.
It seemed to me that Peter Jordanson at one time shared, I even on the Ukraine thing, I feel like he shared our take on it. Like, he did the talk with Kagan, which I listened to, which Kagan had a solid selectorate theory take on it, the same position as us. And Jordan Peterson seemed to adopt his position because he knew more on the issue than him. And then his audience came in to the comments, and I mean, you can disagree with me, Sitch, but he basically articulates this in the Ukraine video. He says, I did a talk with Kagan, and a lot of people disagreed with Kagan and were upset that I had him on my channel, and left a bunch of comments to go to Mearsheimer. So I went to Mearsheimer, and this guy got a bunch of clicks on his video, and I watched the video, and now I'm a Mearsheimer simp. And so
well, he's not really adopting Mearsheimer's position, though.
Okay.
I mean, he has his own weird position. That's
right.
That
I didn't see
America's
the whole...
degenerate, and
right.
We're the real authoritarians, right. And obviously Putin, believes in God, so he's not an authoritarian, and he should be afraid of the West.
You're okay. Wait, okay. You're hyperbolizing what he said. You're making it sound a lot worse than what he said. George was adding a lot more nuance and complications to it. Wasn't so simplistic.
Slightly.
But he called the West like.
I know he got you. Listen, he called it degenerate. It got your elephant.
Well, the question is,
when before this video
is it degenerate?
When before this video did Jordan Peterson come out in favor of Tim Pool's Civil War?
He hadn't.
Okay,
you're right. He had not. But wait, let me before I move on to that point, which is an important point. I want to address Brain's chat.
Yes.
Brain's super chat actually doesn't make sense, because I think the reason that we're upset is because we view Jordan Peterson as being in our camp, in the enlightened centrist camp, of being, kind of moving free of a specific ideology. So, so your own chat doesn't make sense, because obviously if someone moves from being enlightened centrist to being like a more partisan in one direction or the other, you would see that as being sad. Yeah. Now, I'm not saying that that's what happened to Jordan Peterson. I'm not as down on him. I'm trying to pull Adam a little bit back from the edge of the cliff. Okay.
I know.
So
Adam's flirtation with Jonathan Haidt eventually got the best of him. He's a Jonathan Haidt stan through and through now.
Dude, there you go.
He just released a video, and I'm curious as hell how Jonathan Haidt feels about it, because in the video, he talks about this long email thread he did with Jonathan Haidt and I can't think of the other guy's name, but he basically uses Steven Pinker. Yeah. He basically uses Jonathan Haidt and Steven Pinker to sign off on his beliefs about social media. And Jonathan Haidt, it'd be difficult for me to think Jonathan Haidt agrees with his Ukraine video or his Twitter ban video, his recent turn more towards right-leaning politics. I think Jonathan Haidt is firmly way lefter than me, so
right.
I doubt he likes the new Jordan Peterson, using his name so liberally in a video.
If you had to steelman Jordan Peterson's perspective, how would you do it? Because I think, okay, the question is, with like the trans surgery stuff, it's like I've spent some time in the D-trans subreddit and whatnot. And like, you see the stories online and whatnot. And it's like, okay, if it is the case that we're in like a social contagion kind of mass hysteria, which I think is what it's historically been called. And that's a well-documented like historical phenomenon, right? Like lobotomies even. It's like, well,
electroshock, lobotomies.
Right. So then the question is, okay, is it better to stick to your principles and say, even though we know that a lot of people are going to get hurt by this, we have to say, no, look, an adult has the right to get whatever surgery they see fit, and that's that. And I'm in that side. I believe that an adult should be able to get whatever surgery. I think Peterson was wrong, but I can understand the perspective of like, and he's a clinical psychologist, so he knows more on, to what degree can this type of stuff spread psychologically. It's like, well, I get the perspective of, okay, Elliot Page is a famous person and people will look up to him and therefore want to transition. But and so Peterson is like, no, we have to stop it there because we don't want to set the wrong example to kids. But I think that ship has sailed to some degree. And now our only options are, what's the best way to convince people that, this is not, what would you say? What's the best way to convince people that this is not an inevitable path? If you feel, you have gender dysphoria, doesn't mean you're gender dysphoric. It's like, well, we're not going to stop anyone, but because we want adults to be able to have whatever rights they want, but like, you have to also look at the facts and look at, the rate at which it's increasing at exponential rates, and kids are going to get screwed over and stuff. And it's like, I think the ship has sailed. So our best bet now is to just let the stories of detransitioners come to the front of the conversation, which I think they will inevitably. And then that's the only way that you can kind of put a stop to this and go, oh crap, we made a mistake here. Because as soon as you start clamping down on it, that just makes people want to react even further. It's like, oh, well, Jordan Peterson, this whole time he was a transphobe. So now, now I'm certain that what Elliot Page did was the right thing. And now I want to do it for myself. It's like,
no, I mean, I mostly agree with what you just said. I think we're going to need a free market solution, unfortunately, to kind of stopping the social contagion of overprescribing transitioning. And it's going to basically be, I think, in 5 to 10 years, people are just going to start suing the fuck out of their doctors. Yeah. And doctors are going to be so afraid to start prescribing this stuff to their patients that's really going to be the thing that changes everything. Yeah. And the reason I think Jordan Peterson's position doesn't make sense to me is because, if you have, like, I understand what he's saying. He's saying to save 1,000, we have to doom, the one, which I understand. Which I even agree with.
No, we don't.
That was his position.
That's bullshit.
Right. But I agree with that to some extent.
Right, that's kind of the opposite of the better to let one innocent man go and 9 guilty men go as well versus
well, it's
you know what I mean?
It's the Spock,
It's
the
like
needs
the
of many outweigh the
we
needs
should
of
be
few,
able
but...
we should be setting up institutions that can decipher who has gender dysphoria and who doesn't. I mean, you're a fucking goddamn psychologist.
Yeah, exactly.
And not only that, in the Kathy Newman interview, he said you can't go about this shit in a finger wagging kind of way, and now he's king finger wagger.
Right.
Yeah. What the fuck?
Yeah,
he's completely reversed himself.
It's not a shake your finger type of thing. It's a I'm on your side, and it's like
he is wagging his finger in everybody's face, and they're fucking laughing at him, and they should.
Well, and the problem is what he's suggesting doesn't make sense, because if you have a society that's willing to just ban all transition treatment, why would that society not also be willing to ban or willing to create an institution that would correctively figure out who has gender dysphoria and who doesn't?
Yeah.
Like, to me, that seems like society would reach that point before they reach the just ban it completely point.
I think the law or policy people should push for is it should be either not illegal, but there should be, what would you say, clauses that allow it that make it much easier for people to sue their surgeon if they, just blindly agree to a gender surgery without consulting a psychologist or something. Because like if you're a surgeon and you're a heart surgeon and somebody has like a heart issue, you don't need a therapist to diagnose that, because it's a physical illness, and you have
a doctor confirm.
Right, you can see it's there's a physical issue that we can rectify with surgery. But with gender dysphoria, for a surgeon to be willing to, hey, if a 16-year-old says they want to transition, and they don't have a 1 year or a 2 year minimum amount of talk therapy or something like that, and they don't have the sign off of a therapist, it's like the therapist should be liable in some way. If I sign off on this kid should get surgery, it's like, a therapist should be absolutely certain 100% that if they recommend someone for surgery, that it's the right thing to do. And like Kenneth Zucker, I think, who Jordan Peterson has referenced favorably, either Kenneth Zucker or Ray Blanchard, I think it's Kenneth Zucker. Kenneth Zucker will prescribe kids puberty blockers, right? Yeah. So, and Abigail Schreier, kind of starts off her book by saying there are people that benefit from trans surgery, right? So you can't even make the Abigail Schreier argument if you say we're not going to, acknowledge the validity of trans adults.
This isn't going to happen. California capped the medical malpractice judgments at $250,000, $250,000.
That's still a lot.
That's not a lot.
But if a lot of patients start hitting, because it's going to be multiple
that's
patients.
That's not enough to put a doctor out of business. That's going to that's a bump in the road.
If a doctor has 10 lawsuits, or it's not even, won't just be the doctors, because a lot of these things are these gender clinics. These gender clinics, which I don't even know if that applies to the caps anyway, if it's a clinic. But they're going to start getting hit with lawsuit after lawsuit after lawsuit.
You need a class action lawsuit.
Well, that's only if it's one doctor, one clinic for a shit ton of people. But I think you're very mistaken. I think if doctors are getting hit with all these lawsuits, they're going to change regardless of whatever the cap is.
Yeah, but it used to,
and their insurance is going to go through the roof.
They used to be able to make judgments to avoid any kind of moral hazard. That's why they would drop a $35 million judgment on some doctor somewhere, and all the other doctors would go, oh shit, that would put me out of business. Now they drop a $250,000. A doctor's just going, oh, okay, well, that's not a big deal.
I think you're so wrong. If it was just one, you'd be right. But there's going to be hundreds, if not, there's going to be thousands of these cases across the country. And it's going to be a big deal. But
yeah,
I think
you just have to wait for it to kick in.
Right. In terms of legislation, maybe what would be a good idea, I don't know if it's legal, but for states to pass something when it comes to transitioning, it's illegal to have affirmed or informed consent models. To just throw all that informed consent model where the person basically just signs a paper and says, give me whatever. It says, no. You need to actually go to a doctor. Right. They need to go and, run tests and try to figure this out. Because essentially this would be if someone who, feels like they're having energy problems, they feel tired all the time, and they go to the doctor and say, doctor, I'm pretty sure I have diabetes. The doctor's like, why do you say that? Well, I'm tired all the time. So can you just give me some insulin so I can start injecting myself whenever I feel tired? It's that's crazy. That's going to get people killed. But that's essentially what the informed consent model is.
Yep. A doctor no one is supposed to affirm the diagnosis of a patient a priori. It's supposed to be, we're going to talk about it and figure it out. And that's why, again, like, yeah, what bothered, FD signifier, and Adam, you commented on the video I made. I was reacting to FD signifier's criticism. And FD signifier commented on that video. It's like,
did he really? Your Jordan Peterson video?
Yeah.
Do you watch FD signifier Sitch at all?
I am aware of him. I've tried to watch some of his videos, but I find them very boring.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
true. But what were you going to say? I interrupted.
Well, so I think it was 2 or 3 days after I reacted to his video, then Peterson came out with the Elliot Page stuff, and then FD signifier came back and commented. He's like, amazing how like a couple days after this video got posted, JP shed all level of nuance or whatever. And I responded. I'm like, I get where you're coming from. Like, I would be lying if I didn't understand why people now have a reflexive distaste of Jordan Peterson, despite the fact that, you know, I personally think this is my perspective and what do I know? But like, I think you like, to the degree that he's reforming science and religion, Jordan Peterson, I think he's like a Martin Luther type character, and that he's reforming how we think about religion and bringing it back. And coupled with the fact that Martin Luther was around when the printing press came out, right, which extended his reach. And Jordan Peterson came out, and he talks about this when the podcast came out. Like, Jordan Peterson is famous in part because of a technological fluke, I think are his words, in that the podcast is now, you know, extending the spoken word that far. So Jordan Peterson, I think the effects of Jordan Peterson's work are yet to be felt. But so that'll never change as far as I'm concerned. But when
I completely disagree.
When he says the up yours woke moralist, I'm like, okay, well, that really, you know, puts a hold on things. So I get people's reflexive distaste. But what were you gonna say? What you disagree?
Well, I always thought Jordan Peterson was exactly what you're talking about. The bridging the gap between science and religion. Jordan Peterson, you know, a lot of people grew up religiously. They become more atheistic and more scientifically minded, myself included. And he was articulating stuff that I already knew about from reading other sources, but he was giving people scientific foundation for their religious beliefs that I thought was useful. I think now he's undoing all of that work in the same way that the religious right overreached during the 1980s and went completely anti-gay and started sending young people running from the churches.
Sure.
I think Jordan Peterson is doing that same exact thing aesthetically here. And I mean, I understand why Brain is happy and people like the conservatives are happy. They've won the war for Jordan Peterson. Jordan Peterson has joined their side. But I don't think that they ever saw any of the value that you and I just articulated for the secular crowd. And I think Jordan Peterson is going to lose his entire secular audience. I don't think he gives a fuck about it. I think he's going full partisan, and more power to him. I hope he makes a lot of money doing it.
Yeah, well, okay, so there's a couple things. First off, I agree. He kind of delights in the whole I'm an evil capitalist. Like, he literally says that, like, I love being an evil capitalist. And it's like, I think that's outdated. It's like, you know, when, like, again, for, you know, our generation, people that grew up on the internet and who can kind of understand like smartphones and all of the the unbridled, we're just going to pump the newest technology, the newest phone out every other year, the uber materialist ethic. It's like the evil capitalist ethic is the materialist ethic, which the whole religious, you know, project is against. So how is Jordan Peterson, you know, you know, how does he respect the religious tradition of being anti-materialist and at the same time say, well, I have no problem calling myself an evil capitalist? It's like those two things don't make any sense. And even in his new videos, they're super high production quality. He's got multiple cameras, like cutting in, cutting out. It's like, that's such a departure. That's so inauthentic. That's such a departure from, we're just going to be in his classroom, the Maps and Meaning lectures, the Intro to Personality lectures, which I think are, when I think of Jordan Peterson, it's like, that's the value. If it was just those lectures, you know, that would be enough. It's like, that was just the camera following him talking and speaking extemporaneously. And now he's doing we're going to get multiple cut shots and we're going to have all this like overlay over it. It's like you've taken the I'm an evil capitalist ethic too far, where now you're just falling into the issues that he's too old, not in a, he's too far removed from the problems that unbridled, we're just going to get pump technology out all the time. And even though we know it's addictive, just like drugs, well, it's technology, so we're not going to categorize it this way. It's like you have a whole generation of kids that are going to be completely screwed over because of social media and whatnot. And to me, Jordan Peterson's just kind of, well, I'm an evil capitalist, so it's okay if I fall into that. So it's like, I get that. I think he is undercutting himself aesthetically. But the question is, can his ideas survive on their own, without him as the kind of person or personality representing them? And
no, his ideas are going to transform into Bible-beating religious zealots.
Well, I have faith, Adam. I have faith in the Lord that Jordan Peterson will see the light and he will return to the ways of being a nuanced, enlightened centrist. This
is the atheist. I know you're
Sitch. I don't. Yeah.
Adam, you are.
I'm a fucking realist.
You're too selected theory-ish. You're like, he's part of Daily Wire now. It's all over. And I'm like, nah, come on.
Adam is cringe atheist adjacent. He's not cringe atheist yet. Jordan Peter, wait a second. Never buy.
I'm pro science. I'm not like.
That's why you're adjacent.
Part of my identity is not. I don't go around. I don't believe. A belief in God is bad.
Is alt-right adjacent.
Right.
So if pro-science is cringe atheist adjacent.
Yeah.
I don't buy the whole and this is like Rationality Rules makes criticisms in the same vein of like Jordan Peterson and.
You mean rat rules?
Yeah. Rat rules. Yes. And it's like I don't buy that at all because Jordan Peterson shits on fundamentalists like left and right, and it's like funny almost.
It's not going to happen though. That's not going to be a thing anymore.
We'll see.
I don't know because I don't.
We're gonna have to pull another $500 bet out here because I feel there's money on the table. There's money to be made here.
Listen, I'm not betting on this one.
The religious fundamentalists. I've watched so much Jordan Peterson, and I know exactly what you're talking about. Mm-hmm. He has poked fun at he calls them the naive fundamentalists. Those naive fundamentalists are paying his light bill right now. Okay, that's the big difference.
So you think? Yeah, but it's not like audience capture.
But Jordan Peterson is
100% audience capture.
He doesn't need to be part of the Daily Wire. Okay, he's fine on his own. He's got a lot of money. He's selling all his books, doing his tours. He's probably well off.
Yes,
I don't think he's like
as you climb the social hierarchy, you start like.
The hierarchy climbs you. Yeah, I understand.
Yeah, scotch that doesn't cost $3,000 a bottle doesn't taste that good anymore.
Okay,
You're like,
it gets built in your unconscious.
I understand. Yeah, but
before you even think about it.
I will give Jordan Peterson all the credit in the world until I see evidence contrary. Okay,
I agree.
You've seen evidence.
You're not 100. You're not for sure wrong, but you're probably wrong. Is what I'm saying.
I'm pulling the destiny here.
We'll see.
Nobody's willing to bet money on it. We all know Adam's right.
Okay. I watched like the first 10 seconds of your video on FD Signifier. He called Jordan Peterson. He said he was like a white nationalist, fascist.
Yeah.
See, but that's even like that's insane. First of all, that's fucking bad.
Can I ask you guys advice?
But let me just say,
go ahead. Sorry.
Anything Jordan Peterson said about Ukraine or the trans stuff, that does not have anything to do with fascism or white nationalism. So FD Signifier is still a moron.
Right. And I put that in the comment where he said, don't pretend that you Jordan Peterson fans haven't been gaslighting us on the left, like trying to convince us that he's not what we said he was. And I said specifically, it's like, you go look at Jordan Peterson's comments on like gender fluidity. He explicitly says, do I believe gender fluid people are real? He says, yes, 100%. And, it's like 1 out of 10 people has a masculine temperament. 1 out of 10 females have a masculine temperament, vice versa for males. And it's like, to me, again, going back to the whole idea of, well, if Jordan Peterson can speak for the kind of liberal side in the Daily Wire and
that's
Peterson
great.
Can say, yeah, and talk about the stuff of like, well, hold on, everyone, not every male is a super masculine, super interested in things. Like, they're males who are interested in art and aesthetics. And I think Peterson even puts himself in that category where he's like, he worked in like childhood daycares and stuff like that. So from my perspective, I think there's a real opportunity for him to bring people on the right more to the center. Now, to your point, Adam, he could get audience captured and get sucked into that. But
could
I mean he's certainly fallible. You know, the other thing too is with, you know, the whole how long was he out with the benzo addiction? Was it like a year and a half or something like that?
First of all, he didn't have a benzo addiction. How dare you? How dare you?
The withdrawal, right? Didn't he have benzodiazepine withdrawal?
He took it, well, according to his daughter, he took it only once. So unless she's
sure, but he was on, you're right. I'm being imprecise with my words,
yes.
You could say. He was on some other antidepressant or something that
I
think the
some
benzo
weird
subbed in
reaction
for.
or something. Yeah.
Right. So he was out with a horrific sickness for what, a year and a half or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
You know, us three, I would assume, can't even imagine, like, okay, what does that do for you psychologically? Plus being at how old, he's almost 60, right? Something like that.
Yeah.
Like that, like from my perspective, that has got to utterly reaffirm it's like you have a near-death experience, right? And then you become more, you know, lively or whatever.
Shakes your worldview, yes.
Yeah. And like having to, what would you say, swallow his own medicine in terms of like, and he talks about all the time. He says, don't become resentful, you know, don't be like, it does nothing good. It's like, he's like, that tested me a lot. And he came through on it. So I could easily see from his perspective, like he went through the closest thing to hell imaginable and then came out and kind of doubled down in his belief. And that's why he's like, okay, I'm going to go from the kind of ivory tower intellectual where I can just explore these ideas kind of as their own, you know, without super much consequence. And now I'm going to enter the political arena where I can actually influence policy or something like that. Like, even though I disagree with him, I get that. And so, you know, I'm not ready to write him off just yet and then become a Jonathan Haidt simp like Adam.
Well, I mean, I'm not really a Jonathan Haidt simp. I've said many times, you know, if Haidt changes positions, I'm like, I'll leave Haidt too.
Well, right, we're free thinkers. As cringe it is to tell people that. What's your political position? Well, I'm actually a free thinker, so. But yeah,
I'm outside the matrix, unlike you.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
I mean, FD Signifier is in the matrix. He's a total NPC. So you know, you can make all the arguments all day. And
FD Signifier's a conservative too, which is what's hilarious. You listen to
any of. What do you mean?
Well, if you actually listen to his live streams, all of his moral intuitions are conservative.
Really?
Yeah. He did a video where he talked about how sending your kid, like if you're black and you send your kid to an all-white school, that's bad. You should.
Yeah, you mentioned that.
Yeah, which is a conservative position. How is it not? Yeah. It's an ethnocentric position.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Well, listen, we gotta talk. We gotta get Jordan Peterson on, Adam, and we'll have to hash all this stuff out. Right.
He went on Kyle Kalinski's thing.
Exactly.
He did,
and I'm glad Kyle pushed back on him. I thought they were good questions. And he got right to the bottom of the issue, which was, do you think it should be illegal for adults? And he's like,
we don't have a big enough platform. He's not going to answer the porn question.
I'm not going to ask Jordan Peterson the porn question.
What's the porn question?
Why?
I have too much respect for Jordan Peterson.
What's the porn question?
The porn question is when you watch porn.
Don't say that again, Sitch, because that says you disrespect everybody else.
I know, you're right. Yeah, you're right. I was saying it as a joke. I was saying it as a joke. But I'm not gonna ask the porn question. The porn question is when you watch porn, if you watch porn, do you kind of view like yourself as like in the scene as being a participant, or do you kind of view
POV?
It like you're like a POV, or do you kind of view it like you're just a person watching
two people have sex,
people or however many people having sex.
Yeah. You can ask Jordan Peterson that question.
I'm not going to ask Jordan Peterson.
I was going to ask you guys because
wait, what's your answer?
I need to have another beer.
You don't have to answer that question.
I don't.
Look at this guy. All right.
Yeah.
We had Dr. Moeller answer that fucking question.
Did he really? That was a great one, by the way.
He didn't specifically answer, and he actually looked like he didn't understand the question.
What are you talking about? What did he
say?
I'm supposed to be the one that's remember shit. He 100% answered that question. He said voyeur. He said voyeur because people in the porn do weird, like crazy shit, and he's not going to pretend like he's doing that.
He said, "If I ever was to watch porn."
He says a joke. Okay.
No, he was serious.
Officially, I recommend everyone wean off porn if possible. Use your imagination. It's far more mentally healthy. I was gonna, because the whole like taking a stance, this is a permanent problem that I think about in terms of like, not the porn stuff, a permanent taking a stance in terms of like, okay, at what point do you be the, what would you say, like the mediator? Like, I'm going to engage with like Vosh, good faith, right? Even though I know he's not.
Sucker.
Right? Versus like, okay, I'm going to take a stand and just call out stuff for what it is. So for example, like Adam, you said FD signifier is like an ethnocentrist. And if he has the position that if you have black kids, you should not put them with white kids, it's like, okay, that's not inaccurate, right? Like you should probably call that out for what it is. Like, fair enough. But then my perspective is like, is it better to be, because I have two FD signifiers, one, and then I did one on like Philosophy Tube's criticism of Jordan Peterson. And what happened is, because I typed in Philosophy Tube and FD signifier's name in the title, all of their fans came to the video, and it's super disliked, and I get all this hate and shit. And it's like, right. Shouldn't I be, is it better to say what I think is true in the language that comes to mind, or is it better to be like, if a fan of FD signifier or a fan of Philosophy Tube landed on one of my videos, should I, even though like, FD signifier, he's really smart, and he I do admire him in a lot of ways, which is true. Like FD signifier is clearly intelligent, right? You can't say he's stupid. Mm-hmm. Right? So, like, is it better to do that, or is it better to stick to your guns and be like, no, you know what? Someone who says if you're black and you have black kids, you should not send them to school to a white kid. Like,
you're misinterpreting what I said. He said that your kid shouldn't be the one black kid in an all white school. He didn't say you shouldn't send your, like, there's no, it's a different position, obviously.
Sure.
Which is a situation that, I empathize with the black community. Obviously, being a minority, that's something that you have to face. And I went to a school in Southern California for a year where I was like one of 5 white kids. It was an all black school. So, I've literally had that experience.
Yes, I had the same thing, except it's all Asian, not black, but yeah.
Yeah, it is a definitely, it's a culture shock, because it's hard not to notice.
So do you agree with him then? Do you think that he's in the right for that?
Well, I don't. This is the moral intuitions of the conservative and the liberal progressive, whatever you want to call it. This is where they diverge, because conservatives are xenophobic and liberals are xenophilic. So it could be someone's dream. Like, a lot of people, they're a foreign exchange student. Like, it's their dream to go be the only, to be the only whatever race they are in a classroom full of different people. So it really depends upon your temperament. And I'm just saying that if that is FD signifier's temperament, his temperament is the conservative temperament, not the liberal temperament, who is like, I want to go live in Japan where I'm the only white guy.
Yes, I buy that 100%. I have a picture of on my wall of heroes. It's got 4 people so far. I'm going to add to it.
But his kid might be like, Dad, I'm dying to go to the white school,
Sure. Yeah, he takes that stance ahead of time. Sure.
Yeah.
Well, I get that. I was going to say, I got a picture of Malcolm X on my wall. So when you talk about like, temperament of, I want to be, what did Muhammad Ali say?
The very best.
Like, I want to be the very best. Yes. No, that was Rocky Balboa. Or was it?
Muhammad Ali? Ash Ketchum, but okay.
That's right. Oh God, confusing Ash Ketchum for Rocky Balboa.
It's understandable. They're very similar.
But like the whole, okay, like if a person who's black says like, I would rather be around just my own people, it's like, okay, I'm not one to judge, so like fair enough. And I think you're right. It is
but as soon as a white guy comes out and says that FD signifier is going to lose his fucking mind, he's going to be like, oh my God, he's a fucking white supremacist.
Yeah.
So how come he can say it? How come FD signifier can come out and say, listen, I'm an ethnocentric,
because
whatever you are.
Historically, Adam, because of the fact that Western civilization was founded on racism.
Right.
It fundamentally alters the entire realm of discourse that we're operating in.
Well, no, America is great because we're a multi-race society. I don't even like to say multicultural because American culture is multi-ethnic.
We're multiracial.
Yeah.
Right. multicultural. It's like every culture has subcultures, so every culture is multicultural.
Sure.
Multicultural means like the fundamental, like every American.
There's Gothics, that black goth creator.
Right. That's literally a goth and emo and shit like that. Or, California versus Texas or whatever. Yes. It's like every culture has subcultures. But when you talk about multiculturalism, it's like, that means like, no. If you're in America, whether you're a Muslim or a Christian or a white person or a black person, whoever you are, as long as we all agree that free speech is important and freedom of religion is important and that individuals should be valued, then we're on the same page. But multiculturalism applies, no, you can have people that believe in free speech and people that don't. It's like, no, you can't. That's literally the definition of tribalism, right? But multiracialism is the beauty of, to your point, America and multiracialism is like people of any race can abide by the same cultural values. That's what makes it so ubiquitous and universal and whatnot.
So you had some stuff to say on the
Sargon stuff.
Yeah, with Carl.
Oh, yes. This is the it's the same kind of Peterson versus Haidt to some degree, I think, in terms of the value of religion and whatnot. What was I watched I think maybe the last two thirds or half of it. What was how would you describe the fundamental disagreement between you and Sargon?
Carl has a position that liberalism has problems because it's based on foundations that are not scientifically accurate, not true in a materialist sense. And by materialism, he means like atoms, scientifically material. He doesn't mean like material girl, Madonna, how much money you make, materialism.
Maybe he means that implicitly, but yeah.
He means, he's talking about scientifically validated. And my disagreement is that I agree with him, and I should have started off with this, that the presuppositions he lays out are not based in science and are untrue, but that liberalism today has, if you think of those as, he's thinking of those as the pillars of liberalism, and I'm thinking that those pillars have already been replaced with scientifically valid arguments. They're just, people don't always use them. I use them all the time because science is what persuades me.
I think you can do that, Adam. I don't think people have done that. I think what happens.
Different people use different justifications too. Obviously,
right, but I think for the majority of people, for the overwhelming population, when it comes to supporting liberalism, because they live in liberal societies, they don't really have justifications at all. That's just what they've lived in.
They don't need justifications.
Right, they don't need it.
This is the way we've always done it, is justification.
Right. But I think the problem that I had, I think that we had with Sargon's argument is that, while we agree that these assumptions of liberalism, these pillars, which he's assuming that they're correct, that he's claiming, are the correct pillars of liberalism, are wrong, like blank slate theory and, there's a state of nature before society and all this other sort of stuff. To me, I think that's all completely irrelevant and has nothing to do with how wokeness or socialism or communism has come in and deconstructed and degraded everything, because people are not thinking about those fundamental pillars from 300-400 years ago. And to me, it's completely not persuasive that opening that he's talking about, these fundamental assumptions of liberalism, is what's caused the situation 400 years down the road.
Yeah, you can think of liberalism as like a city. There are many roads to Rome. And I agree, Carl is saying this road is falling apart and, not a good way to get there. I'm saying, there are a lot of ways to get there, and we have these other ways that other people are using. So, yeah.
Right. Okay. So let me put it in a metaphor in the way that I think about it. Are you guys familiar with League of Legends?
Yes.
Unfortunately, a little bit.
Unfortunately.
League of Legends is awesome, Sitch.
League of Legends.
No, I don't know anything about it. I'm totally talking.
Adam's never played a MOBA in his life.
Okay, so, and the details don't matter too much, but for people watching who know League of Legends, I think they'll appreciate this.
Give me a HOTS metaphor.
A what metaphor?
Heroes of the Storm.
Is Heroes of the Storm the first person one?
No, that was the Blizzard's.
Okay, same thing. Is there three lanes? Top lane, middle lane, bottom lane? Yeah, MOBA. Okay, all right. So here's what I was going to say. So from a mimetic perspective, you guys know like Dawkins' theory of memes, right? Right. So from a mimetic perspective, this is how I understand your argument, Adam. This is the analogy. So MOBA, which is the two bases in the corner, bottom left, top right, top lane, middle lane, bottom lane. That, you know how that originally started? That was originally a Warcraft 3 mod.
I know, Defense of the Ancients.
Yeah. Defense of the Ancients, right. So one person, one time, came up with the idea of we're going to mod Warcraft 3 on this game engine. And then it, through translation over the years, became, isn't it the #1 sport in like Korea? It's like the NFL of Korea.
I wouldn't be surprised, yeah.
Like honestly. So that's an example of Dawkins' idea of a meme, where it starts off as a meme, or just like a mutation, you could say, from one person's random inspiration. And then that gets translated into, you have Warcraft 3, which is just this one mod on one game engine. And now it's League of Legends, which is this whole, esport that dominates the world or whatever. And Adam, your point is like, if we want to analyze League of Legends today, we don't need to know that Warcraft, that it started from Warcraft 3. Like the fact that it came from Warcraft 3 might be historically accurate, but analyzing Warcraft 3 and all the characters and shit doesn't help tell you what the best characters in League of Legends are or anything like that. So the idea is memes, because that's cultural evolution. You don't need to trace the origin back to analyze them.
Okay.
But you need to know how it's being sustained now. That's the problem.
Sure. Okay. As someone who completely understands your metaphor.
Thank you.
I don't agree with it.
Go ahead.
Because you can make a counter argument. You could say, well, wait a minute. There could be fundamental flaws in League of Legends that hone back from the programming of Warcraft 3. For example, last hitting mobs for experience. The only reason that was part of the game was because it had to be part of the game, because that was part of the programming of Warcraft 3. Right. So maybe we should get rid of that. Maybe that was a fundamental flaw from its origin point.
Right. So the secondary analogy is, what if we were running on the same software? Because if we were running on the same software, if it was the same game engine, then you would need to analyze, to your point, what the original iteration of it was, right? Because that's like a genetic argument. Like we do actually need to analyze chimpanzees and our ancestors for genetic information, because we're running on the same hardware. Okay, so this is not a argument or a justification. This is how I think the argument lays out. So did you guys watch the Richard Dawkins and Brett Weinstein debate they had a couple years ago?
Of course.
Yeah.
Yes, that's I've seen that like 3 times. It's one of my favorite. So if you recall, Adam, he said memes are extended phenotypes, right? Memes are designed to serve the genes. So the idea is, and this synthesizes with Peterson, is that, nice, kisses everywhere, is that the idea is that,
I got him. I totally got him.
I know. And hold on.
Why do you have that?
What's up, Sitch? Oh, I forgot you can see me now.
Why do you have that?
What's the matter? My wife came in and gave me a little peck on the cheek.
Anyway. You're just trying
are those not animated? Those are real? No, that's
of course.
No, it's not real.
Of course it's real.
Yeah. Anyway, before I was utterly derailed.
Yes, thank you.
Oracle diversionary tactics.
Yes.
Can I do this with Sam Cedar? Can I use this in the Sam Cedar debate?
You should. You should.
This one's better. Sam, why are you drinking buckets of cum? Sam, put the cum bucket down.
That one you do have to use the Sam conversation.
Sam, you can't drink that much cum. It will kill you.
Okay. Disavow. Okay, illegally disavow.
I'm sorry, guys.
No,
now fair. Say it like you're a Speed Racer character.
Oh, I know.
Okay,
anyway, back to
serious talk.
Yeah, back to serious talk. Warcraft 3 and whatnot.
And Dota.
And Dota. Richard Dawkins and Jordan Peterson.
Right. Memes have to serve culture, or cultural memes serve the genes. Yes, I agree.
But only if natural selection has had enough time to select against them. So for example, like Weinstein will talk about like propaganda or like advertisements. Like it appeals to like a base emotion or like an archetypal emotion, like, oh, you need to be more beautiful, or oh, you need to do this for your friends and family or whatever. But because that narrative has only been around recently, if we like oriented our culture around advertising and propaganda, it wouldn't work out for our genes because it's a parasitical mean.
Yeah.
So and again, this is not, I'm not saying that this is evidence that, you know, Sargon is correct, which I don't think he's actually correct, because I think he's not going deep enough in terms of the Christian aspect. He needs to go deeper to the origin of religions. But the idea is that the reason that we need to understand Christianity and religion is because so liberalism, which is a meme, right? You could say a meme complex, you could say. It's a meme complex that is the current instantiation of however many hundreds of thousands or millions of years of cultural evolution that led up to this point. And so, so then it's like, okay, to Sitch's point about, well, what if we're like Warcraft 3, what if we're operating on the same game engine? It's like, well, our genes, and this is what Peterson talks about when he says consciousness played a role in the direction of evolution itself through sexual selection. He's saying that certain memes became so influential to the course of evolution that they became archetypes. And so you have to understand the archetypes, because the archetypes are those cultural memes that are related to our genetic wiring, unlike, you know, Warcraft 3, which is a new thing that just appeared, and, you know, it could have taken any shape. It could have been a MOBA, it could have been Call of Duty, it could have been CSGO, but we evolved to respond to archetypes. And I think the reason that you need to analyze religion, and you need to keep religion, at a certain point, your rationality runs out, right? You have to divert to axioms and faith claims. But you cannot start from a purely rational perspective.
I'm a little confused, like what we're talking about here. Like I look at, and this is why I brought the 6 things up, because I said these are the ideas that are essential to what we conceptualize as liberalism and what I conceptualize as a functioning society. Like these are the things that you need. You need freedom of speech. You need secure property rights. You need, here, let me just look them up.
Yeah, but
you
rational people
hold on. You need individual rights. You need equal protection under the law. So there's a semblance of fairness, which obviously appeals to the moral intuitions of fairness that you can argue there's a biological component to. Right. I don't care about any of that stuff. I'm saying these are the core ideas, and we need to focus on how to sustain those ideas over time. Like we've had a lot of debate on the show about freedom of speech, because freedom of speech seems to be something we're tacitly, you know, connected to, because people love to deny the speech of people they disagree with. And then, you know, when they're being suppressed, oh, we need freedom of speech, right? They're completely hypocritical about it. Now, how you foster a respect for that meme in society is a completely different thing. I mean, 1,000 years ago, the priest would have come out and said, God loves freedom of speech, and that we all want to be like the archetype of God, and God loves freedom of speech, so we should love freedom of speech. And that was the good justification to sustain this idea over time. As people lost interest in the priest, they're like, this guy's a charlatan, a grifter. Yep. Now we need a new justification, because I'm saying these 6 core principles need some sort of way to sustain them over time. Now, you're talking and saying a lot of things about we need to examine religion and this and that and this and that. All you're doing is saying, I'm looking for a good justification that'll work with some people. Of course, it won't work with everyone. Everyone is using different justifications now. Like they're so
sure, based on temperament.
So what is the point of saying, like, we need this justification that's going to work for everyone? I think we live in such a complex world that we really need to be thinking, okay, different people require different justifications for different things. Like we literally have, you know, something like freedom of speech. I would think more liberal types are appealing to a completely different justification. They don't like people telling them what to do, which is the Liberty Oppression Foundation. And I think conservatives are appealing to a sense of tradition. This is the Constitution. Our sacred document says that so it's a completely different moral intuition that they're using. and a completely different justification, but we're both coming to the assumption freedom of speech is necessary for society, and I believe it is.
I agree, but how do we, I guess...
How do we make the conservatives and progressives agree on the justification? That's a fool's errand.
Well, not if there's separate justifications based on temperament. I think that's what we were talking about. Why is freedom of... Can you not make a rational case against free speech?
I do, but I'm one of the few that does. And I did in my thing. I said, listen, freedom of speech, the reason for it is conflict resolution through persuasion instead of violence. And the negation of these are queer theory, CRT, and obviously there are a half a dozen religious, like Islam is against freedom of speech, obviously, blasphemy laws.
Right.
So those are negations of this idea that takes a lot of work to sustain in culture, and that is a scientific justification for it.
It's a scientific justification, but if Islam, I don't know much about Islam, but you said Islam...
conflict resolution through persuasion instead of violence is the scientific justification.
Right, but what if people say that hate speech causes more harm by allowing anyone to speak? That's harmful.
They are saying
rational.
They are saying that now.
Right. So that's the rational argument against it.
So they're they're making a rational argument. So you're saying, this is the problem that I had in the Carl debate.
Sure.
So just because somebody can make an argument against something, that makes the argument. I mean, obviously in this argument, the next step, you're saying I'm going to make a rational argument, you're making a rational argument, is we start looking at evidence, right? We start pulling out, here are the societies where they have freedom of speech. Here are the societies where they don't have freedom of speech. We start looking at things. We start saying, what metric are we going to evaluate this society is more successful? I mean, how do you want to, and this is where you start running into the Izzat problem, because immediately the people will say, well, you can't make a moral claim that the United States is better than Japan. And I'm like,
sure. Okay. Sure. Yes. I think, okay.
You can't make a moral claim that the United States is better than North Korea.
Okay. This is good, because I think I know where we can take this to see where we disagree. Do you think that the only way to convince people of propositions or to convince people of ideas is through rationality, outside of obviously socializing children, but let's say adults?
This is baked into the framework of liberalism. It's number 6. Knowledge is based on evidence. And the purpose of that is to create an overarching system to mediate between multiple belief systems. You can't have a multi-culture society where you don't have some sort of system that's going to mediate between beliefs. The January 6 hearings that are happening right now, they're a perfect example of this, because every single one of Trump's people came out and said, listen, our society runs on this thing called evidence. Okay, you can't just come out and say, God told me the election was a fraud. Okay, you have to show me the fucking money. Show me the money, right?
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay,
so that's evidence is the mediator. So you're saying because people don't buy into evidence, which I agree with you, they don't, that doesn't change the framework of liberalism. You can pound sand if you don't buy into evidence.
That's fair. That's fair. Okay, so let me just say, before I say anything, I am articulating these thoughts on the spot, and so I'm going to make mistakes. And so I am not. If what I say is going to sound stupid or go into abstract areas, it's because I'm not articulating.
We're exploring, so it's okay.
Exactly. Let's explore POV versus voyeurism. Let's just explore. Okay, so the January 6th thing, I agree, because that's a specific, like, factual kind of set of circumstances. Did this happen or did it not? That's fair. I agree that they need evidence as a standard there. But I do. So, for example, this is what I always think of. Sam Harris had a podcast, I think, during the Black Lives Matter riots, and he said super affirmatively, he said, the only way that we can change people's minds is through rational conversation.
And that's wrong.
I disagree with that.
I disagree 100%. Too. Yes.
So rationality exists within a frame of emotion and motivation. So for example, going back to Peterson and whatnot, the Slavoj Zizek versus Jordan Peterson debate, I think that was two rational arguments, but to the degree that Slavoj Zizek beat Jordan Peterson is because Slavoj Zizek had a more likable personality, right? And that is not evidence-based. That's not rationality. That is something implicit that we can't really put into words. Well, why did Slavoj win the debate? Well, he was more likable. Like, no one would actually say that, even though that's true, right? So we agree that being more likable in a discussion can actually influence, people's opinions. So the question is, and I don't think you can rationally articulate what makes someone more likable. I think what makes someone likable is to the degree they embody these archetypal patterns of behaviors that evolved from a religious perspective.
But the question though is, what are we going to appeal to for public policy? Are we going to appeal to the likability of somebody, or are we going to appeal to evidence?
Well, so I would say I think art, and I mean like movies and music and drama, all that shit, all the aesthetics and stuff, that convinces people in ways that rational evidence doesn't. So like you guys seen Game of Thrones?
Yeah.
Right? It's like
Sitch did a great video on it.
Oh, that's right. Yes, that's your number one video. Yeah, I was looking at your channel. Yes, the last seasons were trash. I'm rewatching it now actually on the 5th season. It was so good. And now it's one of the worst series ever. Anyway,
we're having an argument over.
We're not arguing. We're
kind of what is the best way to convince people.
You're exploring Adam's argument.
Well, I don't.
Right.
This
I'm
doesn't.
the only good faith person here.
Even if you came up like I think there are. How about this? Let's say the best way to convince people is that we, put a neural link in their head and we just make up their opinion for them. Okay.
Well, sure,
is that, do you think liberalism should adopt this as?
But there's no reason to think that we have no evidence.
Well, no, it's a hypothetical. So let's just say it is true.
Sure.
Like, why are we arguing the whole idea? And this is baked into liberalism is, there's a democratic process and we're going to let all the ideas come out in something we call the marketplace of ideas. And then we're going to decide democratically. And I argue this all the time because I have a much different perspective on this. A lot of people think that everybody needs to decide what are the policy prescriptions of the future that are best going to serve us. And there's a little bit of that. But I think mostly the technical function of democracy is people decide, have the recent policy positions of the past served me well? Have they been good for me? And if not, every election is, are we going to throw the bums out of office or keep going in the same direction we have been going? So I think that's baked into liberalism, and the whole convincing thing is really this. A lot of people focus on the convincing part of it because they have moral intuitions, moral aesthetics that are so outside the mainstream norm that they know there's no way a majority of people are going to elect to live in a society that would accommodate their peculiar aesthetics. So therefore they focus on this, it's very important to be able to persuade people and change their minds because I want them to vote with me on my weird aesthetic. And I don't spend a lot of time focusing on that because lucky for me, I have a more mainstream aesthetic that I don't think will be overthrown by a majority of people. Sure. And so I'm not worried about changing people's minds. I always say, vote whatever's good for you, right?
Well, you not being worried about changing people's minds, that if everyone took that perspective, then that's what might end up in civilizational collapse in the worst case scenario. Because you're framing it as changing people's minds. And I think it's more changing people's minds. It's like this is very few people vote on policy. People vote on emotion and likability of a candidate infinitely more than policy. And I agree, if you have other people who are like-minded in terms of their commitment to rationality, you can make that case. But like, because, you know, Sargon's, we need to get, like, Sargon's general ethos is like, we need to get back to our Christian roots and whatnot. And it's like, I don't buy that per se, but I get the idea that, like, there are some things that I am not willing to argue about rationally, and I'm just going to make I'm going to make a pragmatic embodied cognition move where I say, hey, if I'm arguing with somebody like Vosh or whoever, right, and we're having a free exchange of ideas, I'm going to say the fact that you are engaging in a free exchange of ideas signals your tacit agreement to the value of freedom of speech, independent of what you say rationally. Because my perspective, and I'm sure you would agree to some degree, is that people can rationalize whatever bullshit they want that's completely independent of their actions. And the reason that we need to pay respect to our religious underpinnings is like the going back to the likability thing. It's like people's minds are changed in ways that they don't even realize, which, like, that's a central tenet of psychological development.
Are you saying people don't have free will? I mean, we literally sell free will on the show, so I feel we're in agreement.
I know there's like a pragmatic thing to it. I think people have less free will than they think. I think people
you have to work at free will, that's for sure.
Yeah, I think people say they believe things when they really don't. Actually, they don't act them out or whatever. And so the whole question is like, okay, like an example that sticks in my mind, going back to porn. Speaking of, that's been a great topic so far. Peterson talks about how, like, there's a ruling in the Supreme Court that says, like, what's the definition of porn? It's like, well, I can't define porn, but I know it when I see it. Like, that's an accepted legal, and the field of law is like the most rational, precise, like, get your definition straight all the way. And yet we accept, we can't define porn, but I know it when I see it. And we also accept the reasonable person standard. Those are both, like, just speaking to the porn one, it's like, that's an indication that there are aspects to our perception and our ability to think that are beneath our ability to rationalize and articulate. So rationality alone, and when you say
you keep bringing this stuff up, but I don't know how this connects. You gave
the 6 assumptions, right? The 6 assumptions. Right?
I don't know how this connects to the conversation. I'm sorry, I keep interrupting.
That's fair. Why should I accept the 6 assumptions to begin with?
They have had a track record of success. I would point to
that's an evidence argument.
Yeah, the evidence.
Well, yeah. I think part of what Sargon was trying to get at, which we didn't really delve too much into, is that your bringing up evidence is only evidence of the improvement of, like, material conditions primarily. And they'd say, well, what if someone doesn't care about that? What if someone is this authoritarian, you know, wants everyone to follow their aesthetic?
Jordan Peterson.
Well, okay,
right.
Don't
or
say
what?
That.
What if what if an ideologue is telling an archetypal story that isn't rationally true, but appeals to the underlying psychology of people, which seems to be happening? We're in the most successful societies that have ever existed, and yet we're also in the most racist and in needing of society burning down. Right? It's like, well, to me, that's an indication that rationality alone doesn't have the power, doesn't appeal to the archetypal nature that people respond to.
It doesn't appeal to the masses. I completely agree. But once you start working your way up the power food chain, I think there is kind of a power sharing agreement that is, its bedrock is evidentiarily based. And I don't think you can just toss that aside without, you know, people who are very powerful and high status worrying about the whole infrastructure that they're a part of falling apart.
I hate to sound like Jordan Peterson, but it depends on what you mean by evidence. It's like, okay, just take this question.
Well, the January 6 hearings are the perfect example of this.
Okay, I don't follow them too much, so I don't know 100%.
Well, there was a bunch of people who Donald Trump wanted to stay in power. And there were a bunch of people that were coming out and saying that the election was stolen and that Trump should stay in power. And they were coming up with all these legal theories, not based in evidence, of how Trump could stay in power. And they're pushing this non-evidence-based argument in front of people. Yeah. And the people who were saying, listen, we base our laws and our society on evidence. We're high status people who are, in the room with these huge power players. And for them to say, oh yeah, you guys have a great point here. We should toss all evidence-based thinking aside and just keep Donald Trump in office. Like that would put all of their everything that they've worked for and were a part of their entire lives into jeopardy. Well, I understand you're saying like a lot of people who don't have a lot of status or a lot of power or a lot of influence don't put a lot of stock in evidence. I would think
they're acting religiously.
Do you like Elon Musk has a lot of power? Do you think Elon Musk makes decisions based on evidence, or do you think he's one of these people that doesn't make decisions based on evidence?
Probably the same degree as you and I. We do a little bit of both. Sometimes it's just.
I would like to say I'm up there with Elon Musk. Elon Musk has access to more evidence than I do.
Sure. The January 6th thing is, I think, different because it's specifically about whether or not a specific event occurred. We're talking about morals, which are like much deeper. So I was going to ask you, and this is just the broadest question, and this is what I would go to towards a cringe atheist adjacent, which you're not cringe atheist, but maybe adjacent. Mm-hmm. In the Declaration of Independence, says we hold these truths to be, or it is the Declaration of Independence, right? Mm-hmm. Which isn't the Constitution, but it captures the same ethic. It says we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, endowed by their creator, inalienable rights, yada, yada, yada. Why? That is not self-evident based on any rational set of propositions. The only reason that was self-evident is because it came out of a Christian idea that we're all God's children, and the highest king and the lowliest peasant are equal before God. Mm-hmm. Right? So how can you make that? Do you agree that that claim is not self-evident unless you make faith-based assumptions?
That claim is evident in the fact that the claim was made before we had the evidence, but it has proven to be, we have gathered evidence over time that claim fosters a pro-social society because people perceive, equal protection under the law is kind of the bedrock of liberalism. And if people don't perceive that they're getting fair treatment, the fairness, cheating, moral intuitions rise up, and pretty soon people are rioting in the streets. The entire George
Floyd, already happening, right?
The entire George Floyd riots, protests, whatever you want to call them, were basically created because people had the perception that blacks were not getting equal protection under the law. They were not getting this core principle of liberalism. Now, I would argue that the media did that, and that yes. isn't an evidence-based argument, and the media went off in its own direction, ignoring Rule 6. We're going to base everything on evidence to gain a political and economic advantage over people, but that doesn't negate liberalism.
Sure,
that actually proves
I agree.
That's actually a piece of evidence in favor of liberalism, saying, look, when we ignore evidence, this is what happens.
Well, okay. Well, but I want to go. So how? Okay, I agree with you that if we're looking at it through like a long-term stability kind of utilitarian framework of what's pro-social, you said. Mm-hmm. The fact if we treat everyone as if they're equal before God, that's good, which I agree with. But the founding fathers didn't know, they didn't have the evidence at the time they made those claims. How did we get to the point that they made those claims? But for this faith claim idea that we're all equal before God.
Well, this is I make this argument all the time. Okay, evolution, which we're talking about cultural evolution here, but it works on the same principle. Evolution,
right. Memes serve genes.
All mutations are neutral, good or bad. Of more
fitness.
Yeah, they create more fitness or less fitness. What do they call them when it's a good, advantageous? I can't remember. Adaptive. There we go. And what's a negative one? Maladaptive.
Maladaptive.
Okay. So all mutations are adaptive or maladaptive or neutral, right?
Right.
So these mutations happen, and the organism lives or dies based on the adaptivity of the mutation. Same exact thing happens with cultural evolution. So a bunch of guys go out and they say, listen, I have an adaptation. We we say that all of these truths are self-evident, that men are created equal protection under the law. It's a mutation, right? Now that mutation, it could be adaptive, it could be maladaptive, we don't know. But after 200 years, we fucking know. It's adaptive.
Okay. But what about in the Middle East, where they've taken the opposite perspective and their cultures are still stable?
Well, this is selectorate theory. There are two forms of... In selectorate theory, they talk about autocracies and democracies are both stable forms of society. Right. Many people would argue that, you know, this is the thought experiment that everyone talks about when they want to talk about morality. Like, sure, if society was more efficient, if, you know, everybody lived in vats and just a few people,
autocracy.
Yeah,
sure.
Yeah, just because society
has a rational argument on his side.
Just because the society is, well, if you're going to base it on stability, I mean,
well, who decides whether it's based on stability or... You said pro-social, which I assumed was stability at a societal level.
Well, stability is like the lowest bar for a society. It's got it's got to be sustainable over time. But I would argue technologically thriving is the zenith. And if you want to look at
social media, if it causes exactly the kinds of issues in the media that you earlier talked about, how they twisted the perception of what happened with George Floyd, I would say that's a result of technology that wouldn't have happened in a place like
any technology can be used for good or evil. So I mean, it's the same. Right. Social media.
So why do you say that?
Right now we're in the Hiroshima mode of social media. It doesn't mean that social media is not going to turn into nuclear power plants that are free electricity forever.
And I think that's actually, I think we're learning how to use it.
Yes.
Kind of apply it better. And imagine you have a bunch of distributed shows kind of like this, where it's communicating, you know, and having conversations at a local level, that will have an impact. But the lens by which you are evaluating whether or not a society is good. So compare the autocracy to the liberal democracy. Mm-hmm. You said pro-social, which I took to mean stable over long periods of time. But again, what lens
is that? A society can be stable over long periods of time without being pro-social. I mean, it can be...
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So what is the rational case against the autocracy?
Well,
at least for the people in power.
I would say technological innovation is a must for a society where people are thriving. I mean, for me, it always comes down to the most power for the most number of people. But I mean, obviously, people will say, "Oh, Adam, that's not a I like this."
That's an
metric.
Assumption. That's a faith-based assumption.
My metric for society is the more people that agree with me, the better the society is. That's a lot of people's metric.
Right. So I'm getting underneath. My claim is that you are making faith-based assumptions and then building the rational argument on top of that, which I think we have to do. But with the fact that what is
the faith-based assumption that I'm making?
It's not based on that. What did you say? Technology is good in the long term.
Well, I mean, obviously,
or even that it's that it's good for most people. If you're taking if stability is the metric, autocracy versus liberal democracy, why not say, hey, I'd rather live in a society that's stable into the indefinite future.
What are we calling faith? Because if I buy more Tesla stock, I'm buying it because I think the stock is going to go up. I don't have faith that the stock is going to go up. I'm making a bet on the future.
You cannot make a rational argument that does not start with some assumption that is irrational fundamentally.
I don't disagree with that, but how does that affect?
Well, so the question is how do we decide what are fundamental irrational? If we agree they're irrational, how do we decide which fundamental claims to go by? Because Sargon would say, we go by what's been selected for in the past.
Well, everyone will decide on different claims, and everyone will.
Well, what if you don't decide on them? What if they're built into your socialization as a result of cultural evolution? Because the process of rationality is secondary to the fact that we grew up in a culture that values rationality. If we grew up in the Middle East, we'd have a more theocratic.
Yes, we would. Yes, we would.
Right. So the fact that we're operating with assumptions that are about, we value rationality and whatnot, it's that's irrational and the result of evolution, I agree.
And if we were whales, we'd be swimming in the ocean right now. So I mean, I don't understand.
If we were watching porn, we'd be.
You're talking about
you
understand the analogy that I'm making, though. You're talking about a completely different animal. You're saying, I mean, there are whales and there are humans. I would argue that human society is far outclassed whale society.
Depends on which one.
Well, okay.
Certainly not Jim Crow South and Nazi Germany.
I don't doubt that there are, whale lovers, environmentalists that'll come forward and say, no, humans suck and whales have way outclassed us, Adam, and you're wrong. But my understanding is that our liberal society allows for that difference of opinion without us killing each other over it.
Sure, I love liberal society. You and I are in the same boat on that. It's and I think doesn't Sargon consider himself a classical liberal?
I'm not sure. I don't know if he takes that label anymore.
Interesting. I guess when I see all of the atheists talking about veganism and like animal rights, it's like that's the inevitable next step of rationality that's unmoored to the idea that humans are divine and unique. It's like why exactly? What's the rational argument that I should treat you as if you have as much intrinsic value as me? It's like there is none. I do that because we happen to be part of a historical religious tradition that says we're all children of God, and now we've said that that's not actually a true thing, and yet we still act like that.
But we could also just say these are the rules of the game that we're playing, so therefore we're going to abide by these rules. The thing is,
people aren't doing that.
Are you looking
cause of all our problems?
So you're
refusing to agree on the rules.
So you're looking to solve problems by finding more persuasive arguments, or
in
are
some
you looking?
Sense, yes.
Okay.
I think that is the fundamental issue. Is how do we to go all the way back to the beginning? How do we rescue our father from the belly of the whale? It's like we are, and we got here on some platform that made sense. So now we got to take what worked and cut away the chaff, but we have to take what worked.
I mean, I guess I feel
we're
like
talking in very abstract terms.
Yeah, this is. I mean, we couldn't even. You and I wouldn't even know each other. 10 years ago, 15 years ago. I mean, Sitch lives as far away from me as you could possibly live, and like we have a great time talking twice a week. I just like when people want to talk about. The doomer class wants to come in and talk about society falling apart. I mean, I see stuff on the internet that makes me think that sucks. I don't know how prevalent that is, though. And
yeah, and I constantly struggle with that, too, of like, to what degree am I... It's a double-edged sword, because it's like, do I take what I'm seeing on the internet...
Yes, fucked up shit, right?
As something that's happening, or should I just kind of ignore it and live my real life? Because on the flip side, you could just say, well, Paul... me living my real life, which is really a bubble, because I exist in my white liberal bubble with all my, white liberal friends at my, place of work and all that stuff. It's like, aren't I more in a bubble if I don't pay attention to the bigger things that's going on in society? It's like, I don't know. And
do you vote? Do you pay attention to politics? I'm assuming you're American. You sound American.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. American is
good.
As apple pie.
So yeah. I guess maybe you're just worried because FD Signifier is going to make a exposed video about you, and like
I was prepared for that.
There's so much exciting.
Here we go.
There's so much exciting stuff going on.
I know.
Like FD why are people so down?
Well, but that's the point. Is like and I think there's merit to this, even though I think it's abused. Is like the only reason that you can sit from a position and say, why is everyone so down? Is because you happen by chance to occupy a position that isn't affected by all of the systemic circumstances that are eating away at society, which I do think are real and bad. And that's in part going back to the whole like
what are those?
Mental illness as a result of social media, I think, is the biggest contributor.
Really? See,
You think so?
You should read.
How old are you? 48? 49?
You should read Doctor. Let's not talk about my age.
I know.
You should read Dr. Moeller's book on social media. And I mean,
you know what?
I messaged Height when I read that book. I'm like, listen, it's not all doomer takes on social media. And not only that, there was an interesting thing in the Kyle Kalinske, Jordan Peterson talk. Jordan Peterson was advocating against authenticity as an identity. He was advocating for sincerity, which is the fucking ancient form of identity creation. And it really made me think, wow, this guy really is a conservative. Holy shit. He's like, you can't even form your identity by what you like. You have to form your identity by how people look at you. That's some fucking old school shit.
I had my issues with Professor Mueller, and I still do, but I'm interested in his whole idea of prolificity more, because now, I've only been at this for like 2 years or so, but it's a weird kind of thing of like, how do I act like I obviously can't act exactly as I would on like a show like, well, at this point in the conversation I can maybe, but like when you're talking, you're having a conversation in front of a large audience, that's very unlike, even though it feels like we're just having a conversation with you and me, that's very unlike an actual conversation one-on-one. So like, how do you be authentic in that regard, right? And it's like, that's a real thing. But I don't know. Yes, I'd have to see his more in-depth shit, his criticisms of
Sitch. What happened to you? Where'd you go? Sitch is gone. He went to Taco Bell.
Sitch is taking a shit. He's on POV or where.
That's cool. We have a bunch of super chats to read, and our call-ins went long. So do you want to pitch your channel before you take off, or? Sure.
Yeah, it's called PF Jung. And I think you shared one of my videos. It was responding to Peter Joseph's criticism of Jordan Peterson, the director of Zeitgeist.
Yeah, that guy's a maniac.
I know, he's funny.
That guy's the biggest doomer in the world.
He's a nut job. Yes.
Yeah. What's going on?
There it is.
What happened, Sitch?
I went to the bathroom. You guys were yakking for like 10 hours.
That's cool.
Sitch, I came into this. We were exploring ideas together.
I know you were.
Spirit of honest.
I was listening. I was definitely not playing Smash Brothers and listening to you the whole time.
And I'm very goal oriented. Like I want to dial in on exactly what problem you're trying to solve.
That's fair, and I can definitely tell there's a personality, there's a temperament difference where you are much more like on the ground, practical, in the weeds. And that has its advantages. And I think my criticism is you are taking for granted a lot of things that aren't being taken for granted anymore, and you're operating in a framework that I agree with. But we need to provide justification for the framework in its entirety. Like I've got a minor.
Other people are doing that as well, though, because there's lots of things that like people take God for granted. I don't. So I mean, that criticism that you just levied could
Jordan
be
Peterson would
reversed.
Say you act like you take God for granted. The fact that you treat people as divine individuals and not just instruments of.
I'm just worried about getting thrown in jail. Okay, listen, I don't think anyone's divine. All right.
Except for me.
That's fair. Only Sitch. I was deciding when I came into this, I was as a based enlightened centrist. I was not going to be A-team or S-class. And initially, I was like, "Ooh, Adam's atheist adjacency makes me want to go S-class."
Are you Christian?
Hold on. No.
Okay.
If someone asked me,
why do you keep calling me atheist?
I'm Christian adjacent. I'm Christian
adjacent.
Listen,
I never.
But you're cringe atheist adjacent, Adam. That's the difference.
Yeah, you've put the atheist.
Are you not atheist?
You put
what are you, agnostic?
Look, I never call myself an atheist. You put the atheist label on me like 5 times in this conversation. That's like imagine me sitting. Imagine me sitting here and every response going, "Oh, but you're white, so okay."
No. First,
you're white
but you're white adjacent. So
no.
You're a cringe cracker, Jason.
But you're a cringe cracker.
No.
So
First
yeah,
off,
it's like weird. I don't have atheists in my bio. Like I don't like.
First off,
make atheist videos.
It's an aesthetic, Adam. It's an aesthetic. Okay.
Go back and watch. I at no point in our honest conversation cited your cringe.
Now he's doing the okay sign. What's that all about? You're white.
That's what I'm talking about. This
white adjacent. Now he's doing the white power sign.
It's a comedy show.
It's all about likability. Exactly. Listen. At no point would I have cited your cringe atheist adjacency as a serious. That's all
It was all
okay.
Exactly.
Okay.
As it says, this is a comedy
okay.
So at no point would I actually cite.
This is why you got to be based S class. Okay.
You know what? I'll.
No, I'm gonna get a guilty A team out of him. I can feel it though.
No.
I appreciate the honest exploration of ideas that Adam was willing to engage with.
For a white guy, you did pretty good.
But. Yeah, well, as a cringe atheist, you seem to treat me as if I was a child of God, even though you don't.
Ooh, nice.
Are you Christian or you're? So
I used to be. I used to go to church camp and all that shit, and I prayed out loud and stuff. And then I was like, "This is fucking ridiculous."
So are you
believe in a God in the sky? Like,
so you are an atheist.
I'm Christian adjacent. I told you.
Are you so? But I mean, I'm atheist for Jesus. I'm like pro Christian atheist. So
I know you're a Jonathan Haidt. Yeah. Like I just believe it for the sake of it. Which I honestly I
don't. I don't believe any. I don't believe it.
Me neither. Yeah. Like if someone asked me, do I literally believe that Jesus rose from the dead or that he's the Son of God? I'd say no. And I would say, and one of my biggest criticisms of Peterson is when Sam Harris asked him that question. Harris was like, put it probabilistically. Can you at least say? Almost certainly not. He probably almost certainly did not rise from the dead. Like right. I'm like, yes, please say yes. And Peterson's like, it would take me 40 hours to answer that question.
Yeah, because I'm trying. Sam, I'm trying to get this job at the Daily Wire. Why are you asking me all these hard questions?
Well, I will. If you specify that bet, I'll take you up on that bet in terms of exactly at what point do him and Shapiro get in an argument about like, Ben,
the resurrection
you
of
don't
Jesus.
Actually think that Moses parted the Red Seas, do you? And then he'll be like, well, there was a natural easterly wind blowing at the time, or whatever he said on Joe Rogan's podcast.
How come Dave Rubin's not working at the Daily Wire?
I think my understanding, and I know nothing of him, is that he is a grifter through and through. It's like I think Dave
Rubin would like to work at the Daily Wire.
Probably he's a conservative now. When he said
he's doing his own, he's got his own gig though.
The Rubin report.
Okay.
Yeah. Remember, you saw the video of him saying "please clap" when he said he was a conservative. Now he's like, "I'm proud to say."
Way.
He's like talking.
No
he's like,
way.
"I'm proud to say, I'm a conservative." You can applaud.
No
for that.
way.
You can applaud. Yeah, he pulls a Jeb Bush. Oh, for sure. Oh, yeah. It was like
that's the worst coming out party of all time.
It is. Yeah.
Yes. Well, I appreciate you guys having me on, really. And I appreciate
I appreciate you coming on so I don't have to talk, honestly.
You know what?
Like,
Sitch,
I need a break.
The fewer the words, the wiser they are when they are spoken.
True. So. Brevity is the soul of wit. So
exactly. So yes, I will not the past few weeks and months have proven me right that I didn't want to be a Jordan Peterson channel. It was my thoughts supplemented with Jordan Peterson's ideas, but it's on us young people, us sub 30-year-olds, just like Adam and I,
allegedly
to rescue the father from the belly of the whale and take the good ideas and not present them through the up years woke moralist lens. But yes,
everyone subscribe to PF Jung. Check it out.
PF Young.
Appreciate it. Yes, if there's one video that I would recommend to people, it's the postmodernism and the reemergence of psychosis. It's one of the first ones on my channel because it's literally a timeline of from Thaddeus Russell on Joe Rogan. Mm-hmm. He's the postmodernist and he's like bitching about how Jordan Peterson's wrong about postmodernism, and it's Thaddeus Russell to Jordan Peterson giving the warning in 2017 to the Helen Lewis interview to exactly what he had predicted, and then. You guys know Ryan Chapman, by any chance?
Yeah.
We don't. I
know of him.
Yeah. He's great. If you get a chance to talk to Ryan Chapman, that would be fucking awesome because he, I think, is like he's got that neutral centrist credibility.
Definitely.
That hasn't been beaten out yet, but it's a lot of that stuff. So appreciate it, guys.
Take care, man.
Yeah, I didn't ask your pronouns up front, but I'm just assuming guys.
Yeah. I use they, them, so you fucked up the whole time. But
I use a he, they. He, they, depending on who I'm talking to. Yeah,
I say
he, they. I'll throw it in there. But
I used based and amazing. So there you go.
All right. Thank you, guys.
Take care.
Take care.
Good luck with the super chats. Yep.
Thanks to you.